So we kind of left off. Wait, I don't know, wrong. Oops, right, lessons wrong. So we've talked about relationships in general, and relationships. When we think of relationships, we mostly think about dating relationships and marriage relationships, and so we're going to be talking today specifically about healthy. What do healthy dating relationships look like? We might get at some point a little bit into marriage relationships, but I think for you guys, what's most germane is is to talk about dating relationships. My knowledge, none of you is married. Yes.
Would not be a very apropos time to talk about marriage.
I already got the extra credit.
Why is it not apropos?
But none of us are married. I dearly hope.
Well, but it's
It's
always good to get advice about marriage anyway, but we're not going there, at least not yet. Yes. Oh,
Appropriate.
some of us were.
germane means that it isn't, it means that it is part, it's part, how do I put this? It fits with the subject. Fits with the subject. So if you want to find the right person, and by the way, I do not believe that there is one person. That I don't believe in soulmates. I believe there's the few. That are suited for you. I believe there are wrong people. There are definitely wrong people. No. I'm not talking about polygamy. There's only so many people who meet the standard of right for you. I also don't think there's a perfect person for you because there is no perfect person in the world. So, but there can be someone who's right. Yes.
I would say there definitely with 8 billion people, there's definitely one person that like compliments you the most out of all of them. But also there's 8 billion people, so finding them specifically. So.
I think
the most out of your circle, I guess.
Well, I will say this: once you pick that person, now they are the person. They are the one person, and they need to remain the one person. But we'll get more into that. Art Doctor is going to talk about that. Yeah.
I can share advice from my very limited worldview, my very few 18 years now of living, is that there's no such thing as a soulmate. You don't ever find that perfect person. You find someone who's really good, and you both work toward being the perfect person for each other.
That's some good wisdom. I really do. Yeah.
Do you think that God has that we were meant to be with decided already?
I think God knows who.
It's like being a.
I didn't hear you. Sorry.
So I believe that God knows who we're going to marry. But I don't know if that means
you don't think He intended anyone.
I don't know.
You know what I mean, right?
Yeah.
So.
But here's part of the problem with that. This is important. Because a lot of people believe this way. That kind of thinking puts all kinds of pressure on a relationship, and it can be counterproductive. The idea that this is the only one for me. This is my soulmate. This is the one that God intended. I call it what do I call it? The song, it was all the rage in the early 2000s. Okay, if you're going to talk, I'm going to stop talking and we're not going to do this. You need to pay attention. Okay? If for no other reason, it's disrespectful. I'm talking. the line was, when God made you, he must have been thinking about me. And I called it the egotistical wedding song. I don't know that God has a person designed just for anyone. Maybe he does. I don't know that. But I know that there are the few. Like if not any old person is going to do. For example, if you are a follower of Christ, do not date someone else. Do not date someone to bring them to God. Missionary dating has a very bad track record. Generally speaking, the missionary ends up being the non-believer. And generally speaking, the person who is a believer, it maybe doesn't leave their faith, but compromises their faith. If you're a believer and you want to marry a believer, only date believers. And I would submit, especially if you're someone who is a mature believer, don't date an immature believer. Because it just, this whole idea of being equally yoked, it's like putting a thoroughbred on one side and a donkey on the other. Now, people grow, right? And I would say this is true. Jeff was a believer when I met him, but I was probably the more mature believer. But that wasn't true by the time we got married, and certainly isn't true now. But he was a believer, and he was respectful. And I'll tell you one thing, especially for girls. This is true for guys too, but girls, if your boyfriend is disrespectful to teachers, disrespectful, sorry, to their parents, they will be disrespectful. You don't want that guy. That's not the right guy. If he's disrespectful, he's going to be disrespectful. I think that there are right people and wrong people for you, for us, for anyone. But I don't think that there's necessarily someone that's this is the one. I think there's a few. Let's get into the meat of this. So have respect for each other. Be respectful to one another. Only date believers and only date people who are of good character. And then I mentioned this yesterday. Take your time. You're not in a hurry. Be friends. In a place like this, it's really easy to get to know people without the pressure of dating, and you can assess their character and their walk with Christ all before you even start dating. So I'm going to ask you this question. No, I'm going to say this too. And I know this has kind of gone out of style, but I think that this is really healthy to hang out in groups. And I think that's healthy for a number of reasons. First of all, you get to know each other, but you don't have the pressure of a one-on-one, and you don't have the temptations of the one-on-one when you hang out, especially if you're not actually dating someone. Hang out in groups, and you get to know people. You hang out in groups all the time, so you know people pretty well. But at a larger school, that wouldn't be somewhat true. So I'm going to ask you this question, and we're going to talk about it a little bit, and then we're going to watch a little bit of a video. What is the purpose of marriage? Or what is the purpose of dating? What is the purpose of dating? To find a suitable mate, right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Grace, you're working on a routine for sleep. If you practice that routine wrong, does that help you in the state competition? It does not. And especially because you're young, and I'm not denigrating you because you're young. It's not your fault you're young. One day you will be 62 years old as well. I hope. And it will be sooner than you thought. Practicing something wrong doesn't make you do it right. It makes you do it wrong. And a lot of times dating relationships, because you are young, are not very mature. And you bring in those behaviors or ways of communicating or ways of treating one another into that marriage. And then the marriage has dysfunction in that too. So that's why I say don't rush it. I'm not going to say that a young person, can't have a healthy relationship or get married and be married for the rest of their lives. But I'm saying that it's hard to do when not only when you're immature, but gentlemen, I don't want to denigrate you either. But generally speaking, at this age, the girls are way more mature. And it's one of the reasons why a lot of women marry men who are older, because they're more compatible in terms of being mature, in terms of maturity. Now, that young man will grow, hopefully, and grow in his faith and become more mature. But you just go out there any passing period and look at the freshmen. They think you're being. There's just, it's like, and it's part of it is this whole thing, right? The frontal lobe, which is the part of the brain that connects actions to consequences. And the frontal lobe in a male can take up to 25 years. And my son, Josh, took every minute of those 25 years. He's fine now, but he took every minute. It's why if you see somebody who, what?
I've heard 40 years.
No, that's
fully
not.
developed.
Sorry, emotionally 25.
Emotionally
That may never happen. Okay, we're not gonna litigate this right now.
Oh my gosh.
We're not gonna litigate this right now. So that is the reason why if you see someone on a skateboard that is attached to a rope, which is attached to a car, it is always a male under 25. Always. Because they don't think I could face plant into the back of this car and die.
The first words was enough.
It gets longer than this.
So in your dating relationships, along with other things, be careful and be choosy. Don't date someone just because you want to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. So if you're thinking about marriage, then you need to date wisely, and you need to date in a way that will bring you into a healthy marriage. Okay. I'll just give you one example from my own marriage. I am the only woman that Jeff has ever said I love it. I mean, his mom. Okay. Do you know how special that is? And I squandered it on. So be wise in your dealings. Okay, so this couple is going to talk to you about marriage. It's the young couple that was in between the guy and the gal that were speaking. A couple of things about that. First is one of them, they said that they brought their issues in their dating relations into their marriage, and that is true. That you will be dealing with previous dating relationships and the difficulties of that, the heartaches and all of that. Some of those issues that they will seep into your marriage. And then the other thing that he talked about was, making poor choices in dating relationships. And while I believe completely that God can bring beauty for ashes, I think that the better choice is to have God bring beauty from beauty, and you will never regret the things you don't do in a relationship. And there are regrets for things that are done in a relationship that ought not to be done. So take your time. You're not in a hurry, and your relationship with God is to be the paramount relationship in your life. If that person supplants or exceeds God in your life, then everything is out of whack from there, and the relationship will suffer for that. That other person isn't your reason for being. He or she is not God and cannot take the place of God. So I want to see if I I didn't mention this in this. I mentioned it in the last class. Don't do what I call 0 to 60. And what I mean by that is I've seen so many teenagers start dating, and especially the girl now is all wrapped up in this boy, and he's her whole world and all this. You're just setting yourself up for a heartache if you're going to just rush the relationship and say I love you, and you shouldn't be saying that. And, it's not. So be careful. So here is the statistic, and then I'm going to give you a little illustration. The statistic is, and I haven't read this anywhere, but I've heard it, is that 10% of marriages are high school students. Let me tell you what that doesn't mean and what it does mean. And I don't know if it's true, but let's just, for the sake of argument, it doesn't mean that 10% of high school couples get married. It means 10% of all the couples in all of the high schools ever become married. You see the difference in that mathematically? 10% of marriages are high school couples. Not 10% of high school couples get married. It's far, 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 far less. Just to give you an idea, when I was in 10th grade, I decided on one of my notebooks that I would write the names of all the couples in the school. It was a small school, like this school, actually a little bit smaller, 120, I think, in the high school. And so, I had on there Allison, Kelly, and I had all these. And I spent the rest of the year scratching them out and writing new ones and scratching them out and writing new ones and scratching. Finally, I just threw the thing away because it was ridiculous. And by the end of the year, none of those original couples were couples. That's just to give you a more accurate picture of this thing called dating in high school. Now, you can come back and trash talk me if you marry your high school sweetheart, but your high school sweetheart is just the last person you date. Yeah. Go ahead, Brooke. You date in high school. Okay, so this comes from Tommy Nelson. Tommy Nelson, I don't know if it's is or was at this point.
He had like a studio of like animated.
No, different one. He's a pastor. He's a pastor.
Well, he was Christian. He was
Oh.
Christian. I think it was named after him or his brother because it was like a Christian.
Is he from Texas?
Yes.
Maybe. So he was, I don't know if he still is the pastor of Denton Bible Church. And he started a Bible study for college students on the Song of Solomon. Which, if you don't know the Song of Solomon, it's a little bit R-rated, but
You saw my reaction.
I taught on Song of Solomon to a bunch of women, and we had to have fans in there.
Oh yeah. That's me every time.
So in this study, he gave this illustration for finding a mate about being a race. And just run your race. And the Bible says this, right? Fix your eyes on Jesus, who for the joy set before him, scorn the cross and the shame and all that. And so this idea of life being a long race is in the Bible. And so he said, just keep running, fix your eyes on Jesus, keep running. And at some point when it's the right time, you'll notice the runners, going past you. You'll notice the runners that are behind you. But at some point, you'll notice someone who's running in the same direction at the same pace as you are. And then just watch that runner and watch how that runner runs and watch how that runner's in the life. In real life, it would be like, watch what they're doing. Watch how they're conducting their life. Watch how they're treating people. Watch those things. And then at some point in that race, then you can see that this person might be a good fit, and just say, hey, why don't you come run the race? And I love that word picture, to run together in this race of life. So I'm going to leave you with this question, and it's a rhetorical question. I'm not asking you to answer this. What are you doing today to become the kind of person God wants you? Because if we never do the things that make us become the person God intends us to be, we will never become the person that God intends us to be. And so what are you doing today to become the kind of person, not only that God wants you to be, but that will be attractive to a godly, mature young man? So consider how you run your race of faith, because that's important. I know I've told you before that the first time I saw Jeff, he was ushering at a church. And I turned to my sister and I said, who's that? And she said, it's Jeff Keyser. I said, is he married? She said, I don't think so. And he was in church, and he was cute, and that was a good start for me. It wasn't enough, but it was a good start for me. And now I didn't start dating him until a year and a half later, but that's because I was living in another state. But yeah. Watch, be a studier of people and how they conduct their lives and how they treat other people. If you don't want to be treated the way they treat other people, don't date that person, because that's how they'll treat you. Okay, that's it for today, and